Okay, so Q&A time. So first question, in regards to effectively having the system within 4 years, do you think it's only possible with a certain teacher, or that the right methodology is missing from most schools? Or even is it arbitrarily withheld, and if it was more open, would everybody naturally absorb more and move faster? So ultimately what we're talking about here is teaching methodology, withholding information, and the opinion I expressed in another video whereby the system should be learnt very quickly as opposed to drip fed over time. So what I mean by that, if we look at Goju-Ryu, so one example, when I went to Okinawa, I was practicing Tensho in the Jundokan, and Koshin Iha came up to me. Koshin Iha was a student of Chojun Miyagi. He came up to me, I was 20 years old at the time, 19 years old, something like that. He came up to me and he said to me, "Why do you know Tensho?" And I said, I was taught it by my teacher. He said, "Well, he shouldn't be teaching you that. As in, it's too early." Like, you know, I was black belt. Coach Niha actually gave me my black belt. And I was not supposed to know Tensho at that point. So it begs the question, well, if Sanchin and Tensho are the basis of the whole Goju-Ryu system, why would I learn that last? If that is the so-called key to unlocking everything, why am I learning an entire system before I've learned the operating system of how to work it, how to make it work? It makes no sense. Same thing if we look at Supalempe. So some schools won't teach Supalempe until fifth dan. Fifth dan, maybe we're looking like 40, 50 years old, something like that. And now we're asking somebody to learn the spinning kick into a jump kick. So one of the more, probably the most athletic movement within the Goju system. Well, now we're asking them to learn that when they're past their peak, at their least, you know, at their point of least development. Why not learn it as a youngster when you are naturally more jumpy and more athletic? It makes no sense. So KO's methodology, also my teacher Richard Barrett, my initial teacher Richard Barrett, their way of teaching was, well, let's just front load everything. Try to get the system as fast as you can. If you can learn all the kata within 1 year, great, learn it, run with it. Learn it so that you get past the memory stage. So we're not having to constantly think, oh, what comes next? Is it left hand? Is it right hand? What stance? We want to get past that as soon as possible. That is the most beginner, most basic, most useless part of training, where we're having to think about walking and talking and chewing gum at the same time. Once we're beyond that, well, now we can actually start to practice. We can start to train. Up until that point, it's just a memory test. So get that stuff out of the way as soon as possible. KO's opinion was that you should have the whole system dialed in within 4 years. Maybe optimistic for many people, but if we look at the system of Goju, there's not that much to it. So it's entirely plausible that you could learn the system very fast, probably within 6 to 9 months, and then refine it over a few years. And if we look at the time spent with Miyagi Chojun from many of his students, we're talking, you know, at most sort of like 10 years, something like that. Some were there for 20 years or something. But the majority of his students were in the sort of like 5 to 10 year bracket. So somewhere along the line, we've been presented with this thing, no, it should be a lifetime learning process, and it's drip fed, drip fed, drip fed, drip fed. And in my opinion, it's just a delay tactic to keep you in the dojo, keep you paying dojo fees, keep you as part of that dojo's property. You know, and they don't want you and then going and doing your thing. They want to keep hold of you and they want to control your movements. And I've experienced this in my past, whereby different teachers or different coaches in the various martial arts I've trained have wanted to limit my ability to go do what I want to do. They want to keep me as their property and their piece to use for their bidding, you know. So anyway, so that's what I think. Now, when it comes to actually teaching the system, well, I believe that karate and Goju in particular is somewhat broken in terms of how the system is presented, how it is practiced, and how it is applied. So when we look at karate, Okinawan karate, it is a kata-driven practice, okay? Now, what does that mean? When we look at kata-driven practices across all martial arts, they are primarily solo practices that do not require a training partner. So they rely heavily on kata. Now, that works to an extent. You know, we develop it into the nervous system, we develop some automatic reactions and work with the reactions we already have primed in our system. But what it needs is the corresponding prompts. So we have a response primed in the system via kata. The responses are all in there somewhere. Okay, if you've done kata for your thousands of reps, the responses are in there. You have everything you need. But what they need is the required prompts, the right stimulus to enable them to come out. They won't just come out on their own by magic. Kata doesn't work like that. It does require you being put in a certain position whereby that automatic function now is the response. Okay, so the training methodologies have to train the practitioner to the point whereby they can feel the opportunities for kata to arise. And again, to come back to it, and I appreciate I'm getting some criticism around this, but the clinch sparring allows that to happen. You will start to see natural pauses, natural gaps, natural responses, habits that all humans have within clinch, even trained people, that you can exploit via the use of kata. And this is where our application presents itself, certainly in Goju-ryu, which is a close range system. So the right opportunity needs to be provided to the student to explore the kata and allow that to live and breathe through the training practices. But while we are using supplementary practices such as line drilling, you know, line work, ippon kumite, these set pieces that are very, very restrictive and very, very specific, too specific to have any use, because if one part of that drill is altered, the whole thing fails. It does not work. So we must find a way that is more free-flowing, that is less restrictive, that offers an opportunity for more exploration and more creativity, so that they're not stifled. And again, this comes down to a cultural aspect. If we look at conformism within Japanese society, within Confucian society, so we're talking not just Japan, we're also talking about China, the various influences upon Okinawa, which have stifled the growth of the martial arts because they are contained, they are restricted, they are bound. And if you try to break out of those bindings, you will be attacked from every single direction. The protruding nail gets hammered down. No one wants to be the protruding nail in Okinawa. Matter of fact, Taira Sensei, formerly of the Jundokan, Taira Masaji, who was, you know, I really liked him. I thought he was a great guy. He said to me once that he was always seen as an outsider because he was from Kumejima, or Kume Island. He wasn't from Okinawa itself. He was from Kume Island, which is just off the coast of Okinawa. He says because of that, he was always seen as an outsider. Also, he was very creative. He was in the police. He did judo to a high level. He was using this stuff for real. And it did not, what he was seeing on the ground in the trenches did not correspond with what he was learning, teaching in the dojo. There was a disconnect. And he was like, well, this stuff works. It just doesn't work how you guys are training it or practicing it or teaching it. And because of that, he was ostracized. He was like, right, let's push him out, push him out, push him out. Eventually, depending on what side of the story you hear this information from, but he was ultimately pushed out and, along with a lot of other people, was kicked out of the dojo. And then subsequently down the line, they've almost tried to do their own version of what he was doing, but in my opinion have cocked it up and doing a very inferior product. Taira Sensei has gone and continued to evolve and done his thing, and you got, you know, the rest of it is what it is. But my point being, he was a creative soul. He had vision. He had, you know, the intellect and a practical experience to be able to see a disconnect. And he came up with ways to solve that for him and for his people. But it did not fit with the established norm and the status quo. So ultimately, he was got rid of. Thankfully, he was strong enough character to go do his stuff anyway, and he's still flourishing to this day. But this is where we are. So when we talk about, is it intentionally withheld or is it lost? I think it's just a combination of factors. I don't think it's intentionally withheld. I think a lot of people just don't look for it. I think a lot of people don't question what they're taught, why they're taught it, and just blindly go along with things. I think that's a human trait in general, but it's even more so in Asian culture, where you are, conformality is everything. Okay. Anyway, but now, we only got one question done, but I think we went pretty in depth on that. So I'll revisit the other questions later in the week, and we'll get. I've got a video I want to put out around the health problems of sanchin. So some of the comments were around sanchin being bad for your health and leading to an early death. We'll address some of those in the next video, I think. Anyway, have a strong week. I'll speak to you later.